On July 24, 2025, in the city of Niamey, Niger, an extraordinary session unfolded that could reshape the financial future of West Africa. The ministers of economy and finance from the Alliance of Sahel States, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, gathered under the banner of the AES Ministerial Committee for Development. Their purpose was direct, yet historically loaded, to accelerate the launch of the Confederal Bank for Investment and Development, known as BCID-AES. This bank, conceived as a pillar of regional self-determination, represents a decisive break from externally imposed financial models. During their deliberations, the ministers jointly urged the immediate release of the bank's foundational capital, calling it a critical prerequisite for its full operationalization. In their final communiqué, they emphasized the unwavering commitment of their heads of state, Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, General Assimi Goïta of Mali, and General Abdourahamane Tiani of Niger, to address the legitimate aspirations of their populations, especially in terms of sovereign development. This coordinated move signals more than economic ambition. It reflects a growing continental shift toward reclaiming autonomy over strategic resources and decision-making processes. The creation of BCID-AES is not occurring in a vacuum. It forms part of a wider transformation led by these three nations who, in recent years, have disengaged from traditional military alliances and international financial dependencies. With rising geopolitical uncertainty and an increasingly multipolar global economy, the Sahel states are constructing their own frameworks for investment, defense, diplomacy, and development. The validation of the AES roadmap, described as a foundational guide for the implementation of priority projects, was also confirmed during the meeting. Ministers acknowledged tangible progress in the realms of security coordination, regional diplomacy, and socio-economic initiatives. Yet, they also stressed that without a functioning financial institution under their control, the AES project could not achieve long-term sustainability. BCID-AES is envisioned as a catalyst for funding local infrastructure, building energy independence, supporting agricultural resilience, and empowering domestic industries. Crucially, it will offer an alternative to foreign loans that often come with restrictive conditions. Instead, BCID-AES will operate as a confederation-backed engine of capital investment, designed to keep financial sovereignty within African hands. The ministers noted the symbolic and strategic importance of launching the bank as soon as possible, not just for their respective nations, but for the wider Sahel region. In reaffirming their collective political will, they laid the foundation for a new kind of regional governance, one built on cooperation, resilience, and dignity. The path ahead is complex, but the message is clear: Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are not waiting for permission to develop. They are taking control of their future by designing systems that reflect their needs and realities, starting with a bank that belongs entirely to them. The Confederal Bank for Investment and Development, BCID-AES, is more than a financial institution. It is a statement of intent from the Alliance of Sahel States to reclaim control over their economic destinies. Following years of structural dependence on foreign aid, external loans, and restrictive financial mechanisms, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have embarked on a path that seeks to establish sovereignty through ownership of capital flows and development agendas. The July 24, 2025 ministerial meeting in Niamey did not merely call for the bank's activation. It defined the bank as an institutional instrument designed to facilitate long-term regional planning, shield the economy from external shocks, and reduce vulnerability to the pressures of global financial systems. With the full support of their heads of state, the finance ministers reaffirmed that releasing the bank's capital is not only a technical move but a political act rooted in regional solidarity. Since the inception of the AES, significant strides have been made in defense coordination and political alignment among the member states. The bank, therefore, serves as the financial arm of a broader geopolitical reconfiguration. It allows these nations to finance cross-border infrastructure such as railways, energy grids, and agricultural supply chains without relying on international donors whose funding often comes with conditions that can override national interests. The strategic vision is to reduce the practice of exporting raw materials for processing abroad, replacing it with domestic value chains and regional industrialization. By directing investments into local refining, food security projects, and clean energy, the bank will help retain value within the region, promoting job creation and building institutional resilience. The roadmap validated by the AES leadership outlines key priority sectors: energy access, sustainable agriculture, transport corridors, and education. BCID-AES is expected to serve as the primary financier of these pillars, ensuring alignment between planning and execution. In doing so, it aims to address a critical gap in African development: the fragmentation between policy goals and the financial tools needed to implement them. With international lending often limited or misaligned with local realities, the Sahel nations are determined to craft a financing ecosystem that serves their people directly. The bank will operate under a confederal framework, with equal governance input from all three member states, ensuring shared accountability and collective oversight. This also allows for strategic insulation from outside interference, a factor increasingly relevant in a world of geopolitical volatility. Moreover, the ministers have expressed interest in eventually expanding BCID-AES to include other like-minded African states, creating a broader coalition of countries committed to mutual investment and Pan-African financial cooperation. In essence, the bank represents the institutional backbone of a new economic order, one where African decisions are backed by African resources for African goals. The journey has only begun, but its foundation is already reshaping how the Sahel engages with the world. As the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, takes steady steps toward establishing the Confederal Bank for Investment and Development, BCID-AES, the broader implications of this move are beginning to reshape how West Africa is perceived in global policy circles. Traditionally, international institutions such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank have set the terms for African development financing, often emphasizing structural adjustment programs, liberalization, and fiscal austerity in exchange for loans. These conditions, though widely implemented across the continent, have been criticized for deepening poverty, reducing public sector investment, and constraining the sovereignty of African governments. By launching a regionally owned investment bank, the Sahel nations are signaling that they no longer wish to be passive recipients of external prescriptions. Instead, they are crafting financial tools rooted in local priorities and guided by the principle that sustainable development must begin with self-determination. The BCID-AES is envisioned to fill financing gaps that international lenders often ignore, particularly projects that carry strategic long-term benefits but may not offer immediate profits. These include rural electrification, irrigation systems, agricultural cooperatives, public health infrastructure, and educational reform. The bank's operational logic is based on regional solidarity, not extractive return on investment models. Funds will be channeled into high-impact sectors identified in the AES roadmap, which was endorsed by the heads of state and formally integrated into the bank's strategic planning process. The July 24 ministerial declaration made it clear that BCID-AES is not an isolated financial entity, but the economic anchor of a larger vision that includes integrated border security, diplomatic alignment, and socio-political cohesion among member states. The bank structure ensures equal representation from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger in decision-making bodies, with mechanisms for rotating leadership and joint accountability. This approach reduces the risk of unilateral dominance and ensures that the institution reflects the collective will of its founding members. In the immediate term, one of the top priorities is to secure the release and mobilization of subscribed capital by the three governments. Technical working groups have already been formed to determine legal frameworks, governance rules, disbursement procedures, and risk management protocols. The ministers also highlighted the need to create partnerships with existing African development institutions, such as the African Export-Import Bank and the West African Development Bank, while maintaining full autonomy over funding decisions. These partnerships are expected to enhance liquidity, technical expertise, and policy alignment without compromising sovereignty. Ultimately, BCID-AES is being built as a financial firewall against external volatility, a safeguard to ensure that Sahel countries are not left exposed during global economic disruptions, aid freezes, or shifts in foreign policy priorities from donor nations. In doing so, it aims to protect long-term development planning from the unpredictability of international politics. While the road ahead will require strong institutional capacity, fiscal discipline, and public trust, the foundation being laid today has already changed the region's posture from reactive to proactive. The Sahel is no longer waiting for development to arrive from abroad. It is engineering the tools to make it happen on its own terms. The decision to operationalize the Confederal Bank for Investment and Development, BCID-AES, has not only triggered institutional reform but has also ignited widespread public support and regional solidarity across the Sahel and beyond. In the wake of the July 24, 2025 ministerial declaration in Niamey, popular sentiment in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger surged with optimism as citizens began to recognize the deeper meaning behind this initiative. For many, BCID-AES is not just a financial institution, it is a powerful symbol of economic liberation from decades of perceived external dominance. Public discourse across local media, community organizations, and social platforms quickly aligned with the idea that the time had come for Africans to finance their own development on their own terms. In cities and rural towns alike, discussions about the bank's potential to create jobs, fund schools, improve infrastructure, and reduce dependency began to dominate public dialogue. Farmers, teachers, students, and young entrepreneurs voiced their expectations, emphasizing the hope that BCID-AES would finally unlock capital for long-ignored sectors. At the same time, political leaders in neighboring countries have started paying closer attention. Governments across West and Central Africa are carefully watching how this new institution evolves, considering whether it may represent a replicable model of financial autonomy. Some have quietly initiated consultations with AES officials, exploring potential pathways to future cooperation or observer status. Pan-Africanist movements and civil society groups have praised the initiative as a bold and necessary step toward continental integration and institutional self-reliance. The move has also triggered discussions within regional economic communities, such as ECOWAS, regarding the future of collective financing in Africa. While not all member states of other blocs may align with the geopolitical trajectory of the AES, there is growing consensus that financial independence must be part of any meaningful development strategy. Inside the AES member countries, the government's messaging has been clear and unified. The establishment of BCID-AES is a national and regional project that belongs to the people. Ministries of Finance and Planning have launched campaigns to raise public awareness, clarify the objectives of the bank, and emphasize the role of citizens in supporting its mission. Emphasis is being placed on transparency, accountability, and participatory governance to ensure that the institution remains responsive to local needs. Cultural institutions and local media have also joined in, portraying the bank's creation as a historic moment of pride. Meanwhile, across academic and policy research communities, the emergence of BCID-AES is being studied as a case of innovative institutional engineering. Analysts are examining how a coalition of low-income countries, often portrayed as fragile, has successfully created a sovereign financial mechanism in a short time span, with clear political backing and technical ambition. The success of this initiative is already reshaping perceptions of what is possible when political will aligns with public demand and regional coherence. While challenges remain, including resource mobilization and ensuring equitable loan distribution, the bank's foundation has clearly struck a chord with people who have long sought homegrown solutions. Sahel's financial revolution is not occurring behind closed doors, it is unfolding in real time, with the full view and participation of its citizens. This dynamic momentum, blending institutional reform with grassroots enthusiasm, may prove to be the most powerful force behind BCID-AES's long-term success. As the Confederal Bank for Investment and Development, BCID-AES, moves closer to becoming fully operational, its significance is beginning to transcend regional borders and influence continental debates about the future of Africa's economic architecture. What started as a tripartite initiative among Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger is now being viewed by scholars, policymakers, and civil society actors as the possible genesis of a broader African financial paradigm. At its core, BCID-AES challenges long-held assumptions about development in Africa, namely, that sustainable progress must rely on external guidance, foreign capital, and multilateral institutions based outside the continent. Instead, the bank represents a tangible assertion that African states can define, finance, and implement their own development paths, anchored in the realities and aspirations of their populations. This shift in thinking reflects a growing generational and institutional desire to move from dependency toward ownership, from structural adjustment toward structural empowerment. While some critics argue that the bank's scope remains limited and that its capital base may not yet rival global financial giants, proponents counter that its true strength lies not in scale but in sovereignty. The July 24 Ministerial Summit in Niamey confirmed that AES member states intend to build institutions not as replicas of foreign models but as expressions of local innovation and regional solidarity. This approach has already inspired interest from other African governments, and there are quiet indications that future membership or partnership frameworks may be explored. Beyond its financial mandate, BCID-AES is already shaping political discourse. By refusing to anchor development in aid-dependent frameworks, Sahel leaders are reintroducing the idea that Africa's wealth must serve African people first. This repositioning is likely to trigger strategic recalculations from traditional development partners who have long held influence over budgetary policy, sectoral investment, and national planning. The emergence of BCID-AES suggests that Africa is no longer just a theater of development experimentation, it is becoming an arena of financial innovation and geopolitical agency. The bank's creation also forces a re-evaluation of what regionalism in Africa can achieve when it is rooted in shared values, collective struggle, and mutual accountability. AES leaders have repeatedly emphasized that BCID-AES is a tool not only for infrastructure funding or budget support, but for long-term transformation that includes climate resilience, youth employment, and inclusive governance. The bank's impact will ultimately be measured by its ability to deliver concrete results on the ground. Still, its very existence, designed, financed, and governed by African states without external control, has already altered the narrative. Citizens across the Sahel, and increasingly across Africa, are beginning to ask, if three nations facing economic hardship and security pressures can mobilize political will to create their own financial system, what could the rest of the continent achieve if it followed suit? This question is now central to Africa's development future. While challenges remain, from currency coordination to financial regulation and cross-border investment risks, the spirit behind BCID-AES is setting a precedent. It demonstrates that regional cooperation is not merely a diplomatic slogan but a practical tool for economic emancipation. Whether this new model will be sustained and scaled depends on continued commitment, transparency, and responsiveness to citizens' needs. But one fact is already undeniable: the Sahel has taken a bold step that may one day be remembered as the beginning of a new African century, where the continent writes its own economic destiny.